Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Maria, welcome to the show.
Un piacere.
Oh, yes. Actually, Maria, you need to tell me now. Maria Franzoni is a very Italian name, but the way you speak English is not like the way I speak English. So,
yeah.
but you are Italian, right?
Well, when I'm in Italy, I say I'm English, and when I'm in England, I say I'm Italian because I like to be different. You know, I don't want to fit in with the crowd. So my parents are Italian. All of my relatives are Italian. My full name is Maria Luisa Antonella Franzoni.
You see?
My first language was Italian. And so although I speak fluent Italian, because I don't use it as often as I should or I could, my vocabulary isn't as good as it could be.
Okay. No, but I'm sure it is. You're just being humble.
No.
Shall we do this in Italian then?
We can do.
No.
It might limit some of our listeners, but
yeah. No, let's keep it in English. And actually, I have to say, in preparation for this conversation, and I'm super excited about it. I've got so many questions for you today. Let's see how much we can cover. But I was doing some research, and I had a look at your website and all of the wonderful content that you've published. And you say in your website, there is some questions and answers. And one question is, I think something like, what's your favorite type of coffee? And you say, well, I prefer tea. Now, you need to decide. You are either Italian or you prefer tea.
I do like coffee. It doesn't agree with me. So I will have one lovely cup of Italian coffee a day, but I can only drink volumes of tea. I can't drink volumes of coffee. I haven't been brought up that way, I think, because I think Italians have a sort of resistance. It's like a little top-up drug, isn't it? The little tiny espresso, and it just keeps you constantly. Maybe I should try and see if I can change that. I'd have more energy, maybe.
And also another thing, I know we can jump straight into the interview, but another interesting thing I read on your website in these questions and answers, and it's just a curiosity for me, it has nothing to do with this interview, but you mentioned a book which apparently either changed your life or your business, and I don't know when you wrote that. It might be a few years ago, if you still remember. The book is Open.
Yes. Which
I don't know. So I'm just curious, if you still remember it, what's the gist of that book?
It's a really good book. It's by David Price, who's the speaker we work with. He's a learning futurist. And he said that it was about how we will work, live and learn in the future. And I thought, for me, it was one of the most interesting books about the future because it resonated with me personally much more than anything else. And it did make me relook at our whole business, because at that point, I can't remember how many years ago it was. I read it, I took it on holiday and I didn't put it down. I literally sat on my lounger. I do love books, though, Andrea. I read a lot of books. I love business books. But that one resonated because it made me rethink my business. It made me rethink about what clients are really buying. And that in reality, they're buying something that will help them be more competitive. By learning faster, they can be more competitive. And I mean, David wasn't the first person to say that, but he said it in a way that really resonated with me. And I thought, this is what we're doing. We're helping clients accelerate their learning and therefore beat the competition, because that's the only thing you can really do now to beat the competition. And I thought that's what we're now trying to do as a business, as a bureau. And we're also trying to do it for speakers now, because we're also training speakers. It's about just accelerating things for you so that you can be more competitive.
And on this point, talking about the speakers you work with and your clients, now let's talk about public speaking, which is the main focus of this conversation. What do you look for in a speaker, and also what do your top clients look for in speakers when they work with you?
So it's interesting you do use the term public speaking. I personally don't like the term public speaking because that can be unpaid, you see. So I like the term professional speaking because that means you're going to get paid. But I mean, really, the general term is public speaking. You're absolutely right. But I always say, no, may I say professional? Because if it's public speaking, I might not get, I only get a fee if the speaker gets a fee, because we get a cut of their fee. So if it's free, it's not very good for me for my bank balance. So you're asking me what I look for and what clients look for. I actually look for what the clients are looking for. So I need to be in contact with clients, especially those that are very far reaching far, looking, those that are real innovators and disruptors, and say, what is the next thing that you are looking for? Where is the help that you need? And then I'm trying to find the experts in those areas that can take them to the next level. So that's what I'm really looking for. So I'm looking for things that are really relevant to my clients and to my market. So what I'm really looking for my clients is the next thing, the next issue that they're dealing with. But what people may not know about bureaus is that different types of bureaus deal with different types of clients. So, and you can tell usually by looking at kind of speakers that they work with. So some of the speakers that I might be looking for will be different to some of the other bureaus, because they might specialize in different areas.
Gotcha. And I also heard you say that it's all about the audience. When it comes to professional speaking, the best speakers really understand the audience. Could you explore that in a bit more detail for us? And what is it that they really need to understand about the audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, they need to understand, so whoever's brought them in, they need to understand what is the objective for having chosen me to come and speak. And then they need to know from that person who's brought them in, what are you wanting the audience to feel, think, or do differently? And in order to be able to deliver that, you have to really understand who the audience are, where they are, what they're dealing with at the moment, what challenges they're facing, what type of demographic they are, what type of people they are, how to relate to them, because you've got to then achieve that outcome for the person that's employing you to do that speech. So if you an audience of young people, you need to treat them very differently to an audience of older, more experienced people, perhaps in that sector. You have to really know how to connect with them to get them to the end result. So that's what I mean about really understanding your audience, who they are. It's very difficult for a speaker to prepare a speech and to go in without knowing who's going to be listening.
I don't remember whom, but somebody said developing a presentation or a speech without your audience in mind is like, it's like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern.
Oh, I love that. Can I use that? That's brilliant. I love that. To whom it may concern. Yeah, I love that. That's really good.
Also, you share, I'm part of your Facebook group, which is amazing. And you share a lot of interesting and useful tips from a professional speaking perspective. And I remember one video where you said, you gave a tip about, I don't know if you remember the answer, let's see, but you said, here is the best question you need to ask as a speaker when a client booked you. Do you remember what that question was?
It's a really excellent question, and it's actually a question that I ask. So if somebody comes to me asking me for a specific speaker, I ask that question too. Why? Why have you chosen that speaker? What is it about that? That tells you an awful lot about what that client is expecting from that speaker. And it also tells you whether they've actually chosen the right speaker for what they then want to achieve. I think it's a really important question. From a speaker's point of view as well, there's an additional benefit that if you're saying to a client, why have you chosen me? You've now got their vocabulary, their language, their words that you can use in your marketing and how you present yourself, because that will resonate with another client that is similar. And often a client will say something in totally different words to what you have in mind. I do that with speakers. Sometimes I'll look at them and I'll say, I want to work with you because, and they say, well, I didn't even promote that part of what I talk about. I didn't realize that. But I said, well, that's what resonates with me. And so conversations with clients are fantastic. You learn everything from clients, really.
Absolutely. And I think that's also how you make it relevant to the audience then ultimately, which is the objective. Yeah.
So important.
Another thing which I found very interesting in one of your videos, you said, and I have it written here, you said that if you want to get more paid speaking gigs, you need to do what Beyonce does. Do you remember that?
Oh gosh, that was a very long time ago. Wasn't it? So that was.
If you don't remember, I can tell you what.
I do. It's funny because I have a bad memory, but I do remember. I do remember most of what I've said. Unless it's an argument, then I'll forget and I'll change slides. But no, that video was specifically to promote an event we were doing where we were encouraging people to create, really strong video reels. And for me, Beyonce spends a fortune on her videos, and what a lot of speakers do is they cut corners and don't get a really expensive product. if I'm looking at a video that is cheaply made, I think you're not a successful speaker. And if you're not successful, it makes me question how valuable is the content that you're sharing. So the point I was making there was, you know, if you want to earn £5,000, you should spend £5,000 on your video. If you're a £25,000 speaker, spend £25,000 on video, because the client wants to see success. They want to see that actually, you know, you're clearly bringing value. That's why you're being rewarded. And it has to reflect in everything that you put out there about yourself, especially the video.
And talking about thousands of pounds and money, and if any of my questions are maybe too broad or they don't lead anywhere, no problem at all, I can rephrase them. But the question here is now talking about money. Do you have any, based on your experience working with hundreds, I guess, if not thousands, I guess, of speakers, any tips for those who want to get paid more? And is that too broad of a question, or do you have anything in mind?
I mean, this is a broad question, but I think the important thing when you want to get paid more is to be totally clear on the results. You know, what are the takeaways? And often when you're reading a speaker's profile or on the website, it's not clear. It has to hit you right between the eyes. What are the results, and who are those results for? Speaking of broad, a lot of speakers go too broad and have too many topics. So for me, I'm more interested in speakers that make it go deep and narrow. So, I mean, this is such a huge question. There's so many answers to it, but the most important thing is, what are your takeaways? What is the value that you bring? What is the problem that you solve? What's the solution? What's the tangible thing I'm going to get at the end of it? Because that's what client's buying. The client is buying a return on the investment they spend on you.
And I think that that's very interesting what you said, because it's not just important when it comes to professional speaking, but I guess you are also a business person, so you have a lot of experience there as well. It makes a lot of sense also from a business perspective, right? When you narrow down and you find a way to then become the expert or the best in that particular niche, rather than I work with everybody or I talk about everything. Right? I guess.
Yeah. There's too many people that talk about everything. And what happens with bureaus and with clients, anybody booking a speaker, we need to put you in a box. We need to know where you fit. If we can't put you in a box, you're off the list and I don't remember you. Memory is a huge issue when there's so many speakers out there. So if I know, right, you fit there, you're an innovation speaker, you work best in financial services, these are the results you bring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like David Price, for example, a learning futurist. So he's a futurist, but he specializes in the learning part.
Very narrow. Yeah, I like that. Any advice for speakers who, after a piece of work with a client, they want to have a great testimonial, I guess? Any tips or advice on how to receive a great testimonial?
And how to ask one. So for me, I don't like it when somebody puts a video like an iPhone into somebody's face and says, right, tell me how that was. So that for me is not a great testimonial. So I'm not answering your question, I'm answering a different question, but I will come to the great testimonial. Let me tell you why. I feel that if somebody does that straight after an event, we're all very polite. And so we're going to say something nice.
Especially in the UK, isn't it?
In the UK particularly. I think there are other nationalities that are probably even more polite. But yes, in the UK, we're going to say something nice. And so therefore, or we're going to say politely decline by saying, no, I'm sorry, my hair's not good, my makeup's not good. I'd rather not. But we're not going to say anything bad. So I would rather have a testimonial where the client has reflected on it, has had some time to reflect on what's happened. So usually that's a written testimonial. It can be on video that they send in afterwards, but they're not actually doing it, as I say, rabbit in the headlights with that shocked expression. And then I would actually ask the client, could you tell me, in your opinion, what has changed from my speech? Are people thinking differently? Are they feeling differently? Or are they doing anything differently? That's important, because having them a testimonial say that you're a great presenter or a great speaker, that could be about anybody, really. And also that's not really what a client buys. A client does want a great speaker, but the client buys results.
Yeah.
The great speaker, great presenter actually is the baseline. That's the minimum standard. That's expected. And actually, you can see that from people's videos, but that's the minimum. What really they want is what has occurred differently as a result of it. And that's a great testimonial.
Yeah. And Maria, also, I was also curious. I wanted to ask you, we hear so much about sometimes the imposter syndrome. And is that something that you, in the work you do, you work with amazing speakers. Is that something that's real and that happens also for this kind of top level speakers? And what's your take on this? What do you think?
Do you know, it's come up once in 21 years for me. One speaker has said, sometimes I feel that I'm, generally it doesn't, because the guys we're working with, they are they're recognized, they are the leading experts. And I don't know, I don't know enough about imposter syndrome. I've had one person say it, and I say, what's the matter with you, for heaven's sake? I wasn't very sympathetic. So I'm not an expert in this area. I've also never been asked for it as a topic by clients. So although it may exist, I don't know enough about it. I can't really sort of talk about it very much.
Okay, so in something which is linked though to the imposter syndrome, or the other way around, what do you think qualifies somebody to be an expert in their field? Do you have any ideas here? Because some people say, and I don't know what you think about it, that, well, in the end, it's just about being maybe 10% ahead of your audience. Or okay, so I already see the thing.
I absolutely hate that. All of these are my opinions, of course. I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be 10%. I think you should be leagues ahead if you are an expert. And what qualifies you to be an expert? Your experience generally qualifies you to be an expert, and hopefully in your experience you have some results. That's what's important to me. And what many speakers forget when they're writing their profiles, and you can see this, and I reject speakers that don't tell me what they were doing before they became speakers. So somebody who's a full-time speaker, that's fine. You can be an expert, but you have to tell me what you did that makes me know that you're qualified to talk about this topic. And if you don't do that, again, it's rejected. I'm not interested. So often we will go out and get people who we see as experts in their area because they're working in that area, they're working in that industry, they're doing what we need. They're not necessarily speaking about it. And we will say to them, we need somebody to talk about this. Would you be willing to do this event? Which is why speaker bureaus have so many speakers, because often these kinds of speakers are full-time doing something and are only able to speak once, twice, or half a dozen times a year. But when they come out to speak, they're recognized as the expert because they are the person that's actually doing it.
Yeah. So it's not just about knowing something or being able to talk about something.
You have to prove it. Yeah, you have to prove it. You have to show your credentials. Yeah.
And let's talk about also, and this is something that I heard you say, so I know what the answer is, but sharing the stage.
You have been paying attention, haven't you?
Yeah. I follow you. I like your content, and so everybody. Oh, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but some speakers or many speakers, they love to say, "I've shared the stage with Tony Robbins and Bill Clinton," whatever. What's your view on this?
Okay, so my view on this is that you are not sharing a stage unless you're actually doing a two-handed presentation with Tony Robbins. If you're actually on the stage at the same time as him and he's handing over to you and you're handing back to him, then you're sharing a stage. If Tony Robbins is the closing speaker 3 days after you spoke in the morning for a smaller group, but it just happens to be on the same piece of wood, you are not sharing a stage. So this was really about speakers sort of, needing to be authentic about what they've done and what they haven't done. We see through that. It's not real. You haven't shared a stage unless you're actually, sharing a presentation with. So I don't like that expression. I think it's misleading.
Yeah. And also talking about stages, another thing that you said having a look at your content online is with regard to bigger stages. A lot of people want bigger stages, like they want to speak in front of bigger audiences. But you seem to suggest that is not the real, or should not be the real consideration. The size really doesn't matter.
Yes, I do think that. I think speakers are obsessed with speaking to big audiences. If you're selling from stage, you probably do want to speak to a big audience because you've got a bigger audience to sell to. When, from a speaker bureau's point of view and from the clients that we work with, they're wanting experts to come in and talk to their, usually an internal event. And the more senior you go, the smaller the numbers. So I'm not interested in numbers, I'm interested in the quality of the audience. And so usually if you've got a senior group, it's a smaller group. So, and clients know that. That again was in reference to videos where speakers are obsessed with getting a huge audience, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the results that you're bringing. Yes, you have to be able to speak. That ability to speak is the minimal. Again, it's like, show me the results. If you're videoing from the far back and there's a huge audience in front, I can't connect with you because you're so far away.
And also, I guess, and it's something you've touched already, but it's an important point, I think. If you speak in front of 10,000 people, it's great, but I think it's very hard also for an event organizer to have 10,000 directors or CEOs in the audience, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with speaking to 10,000 people.
Yeah.
It's not normally the kind of events that you get. The majority of events that we're dealing with, sort of the average audience size is 80 to 150. And then you have smaller audiences. Then you do have bigger audiences. We don't have the huge conferences in Europe that they have in the US, where they have really large conferences. And often the really large conferences are public conferences, and they're not, corporate conferences or business conferences, which are the ones that we tend to get involved with, where you can have 2,000 people, you can have bigger numbers, but they are fewer than the more internal events, the smaller events, which have become much more prevalent now in the industry, where there's a lot of, because people are trying to learn faster, they're trying to bring experts in to talk to the smaller audiences.
You've started talking about what matters in your industry. In terms of some of the key trends, do you see any particular trends for 2020 that are really working in your industry?
I do, actually, and it's really good for people who are not big celebrities. Really good news. I'm seeing that there's a lot more emphasis being placed on interaction and engagement of the audience, and a lot less about just sitting back and being entertained. So that's a big deal. It's also a lot less about having social media attention by having a big name. It's about really focusing on what's important for us as an organization or for the conference to get results. So that means as long as you're clear on what your takeaway is, and as long as you're able to show that you can interact and also have something that follows it, because the other important part, again, it goes back to this learning, is that how does that message stay ingrained in the audience? How do they act on it 3 months later, 6 months later? So that's another thing that audiences are looking for, is, how can we then keep that going after you've gone? So this is great news for a lot of speakers who are not the huge names that might be just booked to put bums on seats or, to create media and advertising.
There's a great piece of advice that you gave in the Facebook group, which, by the way, would you like to, for those who don't know it yet, the name of your Facebook group is?
Thank you, Andrea. The Facebook group is called Speaking Business, and it's for speakers at any level of their journey, really. And originally it started with my posting an awful lot. I still do, and sharing a lot of our knowledge from the bureau side, but now the group has taken on a life of its own, and many of the members are sharing amazing content, which is fantastic because it takes a lot of pressure off me, but also they have a different perspective coming from the speaker's perspective as opposed to the bureau perspective. So it's a good group, I think. I'm proud of it, really proud of it.
You should be. It is true. It's very interactive. People, many of them, they do participate and they collaborate. They share expertise and knowledge and advice. I like it very much.
Thank you.
And so, speaking business for those who are listening, one video I remember, I liked it very much. You said, look, we all know about having, as speakers, having a good introduction. And especially if you are speaking at a conference, you should make sure that the MC, maybe he or she knows how to introduce yourself before you get on stage. But not many speakers consider the outro. So it's not just about the intro, but also the outro. Could you tell us about that?
Thank you. That's great. Yes. So introduction's so important to set you up, and it's part of your speech, really, part of your time. But the outro is just as important. So the MC has a really difficult job, because if the event is overrunning or something's going on or there's a problem with lunch, that MC may not have had the opportunity to sit and listen to you and maybe dragged off to deal with another problem, that a speaker's late, how are you going to fill time, etc., etc. And yet most speakers expect the MC to pick up the main points for them and then say, this is what I got from it. So give them some help. I would say to the MC, these are the 3 takeaways from my speech, or this is the one thing I want everyone to take away, so that the MC can say, I don't know about you, but this is what I took away. And they can say it in their own words, but you've got a third party restating the takeaway, reminding the audience that's what it is. And if you're the only one that's done it, which is the person they're going to remember when they're giving their feedback to the organizer, and the organizer saying, what did you take away? They're going to say, well, actually, when Andrea spoke, I took away this, because the MC has said it again for you, because you're going to say it at the end of your speech anyway. The MC is going to say it again. So it's brilliant. I think it's a really good thing to do.
It's a brilliant piece of advice. Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you, this is connected to the introduction. It's not the same thing at all, but in a similar way, for bios. So a speaker has to have a bio. That's what I guess you look for. Correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first things you may be looking at, also your clients. Are there any key components of a good bio?
So for me, it's a really good question, by the way. But really important that your first paragraph tells me everything I need to know if I stop reading. Just like, journalists are great at writing in newspapers. When they write a newspaper article, you get the main points in that first paragraph, and then you get it expanded later on. And that's because we all scan things. Yeah. And bookers are the same. They scan things. So if your top paragraph tells me enough that I'm going to know about you, about your expertise and about what you deliver, that's great. It also, if it's strong enough, it'll make me want to read the rest. And a lot of people make that mistake. So I've seen bios where they start, in 1944, I was born in blah, 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 or so-and-so was born and then went to college there and da-da-da. And I'm thinking, no, start with the most important thing. Start with the most important thing. This person, whatever that achievement is. So that's really important. And there's different lengths of bios depending on where you're using them. So if you start with the most important, then go with the sort of good to know, and then the sort of nice to know. So you're literally grading it so that you've then got a long bio, you can cut it and make it a medium bio and cut it again and make it a short bio. So when it's chopped correctly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And also on a different note, so and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that you work with speakers who speak internationally as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So any advice for those who maybe they are established in the UK as a professional speaker, but they want to then enter new markets? Any advice, any recommendations, anything to consider for these speakers?
So, the first question is, why would somebody fly you in rather than use somebody local? So you need to have some reason why you are unique. So it's all about being, you know, going deep, being the expert, being unique, that somebody's then going to want to fly you in. Because of course, when someone's flying you in, they're now paying for business class travel and potentially accommodation. So either you need to compete on the local level if you haven't got anything that differentiates you or makes you desirable because, you know, because of... you are unique. I phrased that very badly, but I think you get what I mean. Or you have to compete on price, which is not great. You don't want to do that. Price is not a good way to compete. So be sure that you have something unique. More often than not, when somebody's bringing in a speaker from abroad, it's because they have got an international audience. So and therefore you might be known to that group that forms the major part of that group. So if you've got a group of international, but the majority are UK, and they happen to know, for example, Rand Fines, I think a lot of people internationally would know him anyway, they might bring him in because that part will know them. But you have to appeal to that audience.
Yeah, it's all about, we started with this, it's all about
it's always going to be all about the audience. Yeah, you've got to appeal to the audience, absolutely. And
Sure.
the organizer and its objectives, yeah.
Are they, and we are getting close to this conversation, are there any either books or resources, articles, people to follow, anything that comes to your mind for those who are interested in the speaking industry, in professional speaking?
Do you know, there are a lot of great resources out there. And I think, goodness, there's so many to mention. So I think actually the best way to learn about the speaking industry, if you're looking at paid speaking, is to check out the bureaus, because the bureaus will tell you an awful lot about what's going on. And there's two places to go and find bureaus. One is the IASB, which is the International Association of Speaker Bureaus, and their website is IASB web.org. And then there's the EASB, which is the European Association of Speaker Bureaus, and it's easbweb.org. And if you look at the bureau websites, they will tell you the topics that are trending. They will show you the speakers that are being most booked. Some of them will even show you fee ranges. And that I think is the best research. I think a lot of people don't research who's already out there and who's successful. And as many speakers, when I say to them, oh, have you looked at how so-and-so tackles this topic? I've never heard of them. Have you looked at? You need to know what's going on and what's working, because you need to know where's your place, where do you fit, where's the gap where you might fit. Because if you don't do that research, so I think I would start there before you start then seeing, okay, what do I need now that I'm looking and I'm seeing these speakers that are being booked? Where's my gap? And then find the best person to fit it. And what you'll find is you'll probably end up working with different people for different things. I don't think there's a one-stop answer. And also partly that's because there's different personalities who are, you know, who you'll resonate with and you won't. But you might work with somebody to help you with your content and presentation preparation. You might work with somebody else to help you to write your bio or to do your website. You might work with somebody else. And it's very much a personal choice. But I would always make sure you find out, well, who have you worked with before? What are the results? In the same way that a client books a speaker, show me what the takeaways are, show me the results, show me who you've worked with, show me the type of speakers you work with already, and show me how successful you are, because a lot of people out there who are teaching, but they haven't actually made it themselves. And then it's like, well, hang on a minute, give me your credentials, your experience, your expertise. So it's just like when somebody books a speaker, it's the same way when you're looking for somebody to help you, you're asking the same questions we ask. Show me your profile, your bio, show me the expertise, show me why you're qualified, show me the testimonials of the people who've been successful. So I would definitely do that. Don't get taken in by the marketing speak. Do the due diligence.
Of course. And before we wrap up, and I will have one more question for you, but before we do that, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Any questions that you would have liked me to ask you but I haven't done? Any final messages? Anything that comes to your mind?
Oh my goodness, that's such a difficult one. I suppose the message that I would like to share is be easy to work with as a speaker. Make it as easy as possible for people to find you, people to get what you do, who you do it for, then to contact you if they then want to book you, be really responsive, and then just be easy to work with on the day, at the event, easy to follow for the audience, and just make things simple. And that's about being professional, really professional. And a lot of speakers don't get it all right and make it hard. And like, so you want to book a speaker and you ask them for their technical requirements and they don't have them written down. You ask them for their introduction, they don't have one. Oh, I don't have one, I don't use one, which means somebody else has got to do it for you and may not do it right. Or trying to get, are you available on such and such a date for this event, and then it goes into a black hole and you don't hear for 2 days. Clients don't want to wait for 2 days, so it just be really easy to work with.
Maria, the question I would like to ask you to wrap up this conversation, which has been very fun and very useful for me, is a question that I've seen a number of your interviews in preparation for this conversation, and you often, I would say, like to finish with one question.
Oh no, don't.
and it's the same question I want to ask you now, which is very interesting. Let's see. So the question is, look, of course you are a thought leader in your space, in your industry. You are an expert. You've worked with thousands of amazing speakers, but there was a time when you started out in this industry. So if you were to go back to that time, what advice would you give to your younger self, although you're still very young, of course?
Oh yeah, right. You know what, that is, I didn't realize how hard that question was until you've asked it to me, because I ask it, you're right, I ask it to speakers, I say to them, knowing what you know now, what advice? I think the advice I would give is about numbers, really knowing your numbers. And I read a book a few years ago called Profit First.
Oh yes, I know it.
Have you read it?
Amazing.
Right. I wish that I had known that, because I think I would be a billionaire by now. No, probably I'm exaggerating slightly. But I think I would have had a sort of much more flexibility, because I would have been thinking differently about the profit. And I would encourage actually every single speaker to read that, so that when they're managing their finances, they put profit first.
I agree. It's an amazing book. It really changes everything.
Yeah, it is. And it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
It is. Maria, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is one of those interviews that I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm very happy for having had the opportunity to share some ideas with you. It's been fun. It's been useful. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot as well. And I thank you very much again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com, or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.